realising that I had a mortgage and 3 kids, and that my total salary income for the year was less than I earned in my first year out of college. And I was like 40 years old asking my parents for money.
Welcome back to another HdE podcast. Our guest today is CEO and co-founder Richard Godfrey of award-winning software agency Rocket Makers. Richard, thanks for joining us today. Before we jump into Rocket Makers, it'd be really interesting to get a bit of an overview of how you actually got into the tech industry to start with.
Yeah, sure. So I did a computer science degree back in the 80s when it was all a bit different. Computers a bit different then, and then I did a sandwich course with a year out, which was with a 3D company up in Nottingham. And then after graduating, I decided I wanted a job in computing. So I applied for a job in Nottingham, and there's an amazing company called Praxis, and they gave me a job in Bath, which is where I used to live. And so the last place I was going to go back to when I was a teenager was Bath. But lo and behold, I did. And that company Praxis was bought by Deloitte. So I spent a good deal of time in Deloitte doing some amazing projects with them, of which probably the one I'm most proud of is the UK's first DNA database.
Wow!
So I designed and built things that sort of got the criminals back in the mid-90s. Yeah,
that's cool.
Which was sweet.
That was like the sort of first emergence of sort of DNA being used in courts and in cases, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, it was the first worldwide first DNA database that there was, and then they sort of evolved on from there. So that was fascinating, and then also worked in sort of pharmaceuticals and stuff with drug discovery and things. So it gave me a really interesting background in loads of different sort of markets, verticals and things. That was good. And then I joined Microsoft. I joined Microsoft just before the .com bust and into the boom. So I timed that really badly in one sense, but actually it was a great experience. I spent best part, I think, nearly 9 years with Microsoft there and building up a team of architects and stuff, which let me travel the world a bit, see different projects and do things. And that was things like, my last project there was just at the launch of Windows Vista, which everybody remembers as not being
controversial,
a great success. But Vista had this amazing 3D stuff in it that we thought would be really interesting. So we did a project. We worked out that the British Library and Bill Gates and the Queen and some other people had some of the pages of Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks. And we thought it'd be amazing to bring those together for the first time in a few hundred years, virtually into some 3D experience. So we did that, and then Bill Gates came over and launched Vista at the British Library, showcasing this application as a part of it. So that was
right. So that's Richard Godfrey, the man. We're going to start to touch on Richard Godfrey, the founder, CEO, Rocket Makers. What I'm interested to know, obviously, with that background, what was the catalyst to starting Rocket Makers?
Your co-founders, did you know them before? Had you worked with them before, or how did you meet?
Yeah, so Paul and I had worked at Microsoft together. And then I'd worked with Keith on a project. He was in the architecture team at London Underground, and we did a project with London Underground, which was sort of visualising again in 3D all the London Underground network and how it all sort of came together with signalling and that sort of stuff. So we did a project with Keith. Thought he was a great guy, and the timing just worked out really well of coming together.
Were both those based in Reading, or?
No, Keith was in London,
cool.
and Paul was with me here.
Yeah.
So it was it was that sort of thing. And then that's 15 years ago. Almost next week.
I was going to say, to celebrate the big 15.
I know. I don't look old enough.
Exactly, Rich. You don't look old now. So in terms of Rocket Makers, what's been the sort of proudest moment for you in those 15 years as sort of co-founder of the business?
Oh, that's tricky, isn't it? It's because it's been, well, as you guys know, creating a business, you kind of at different phases of the business, different things kind of really happen, I guess. Well, one of the big ones was the Queen's Award, so that was amazing to do that, and that was all built around a project that we'd done with the English Institute of Sport. So this was a sort of medical record system for all the top athletes in the UK, and how if you think of an Olympic 4-year cycle, you've basically got to perform at your best on that one day in 4 years' time. Yeah. And then if you think of drawing a trajectory from today to there, and really the job of this system was just making sure that through illness or injury, people didn't get off that trajectory. So it would try and stop people getting ill, and when they did get ill, how do you get them back as fast as possible to the training schedules and things that are there. So that was a really fascinating project. And but amazing that it kind of, we could explain that in terms of the innovation around it to get the Queen to work.
I'm a massive fan of that project and what you did. I think I heard about it a couple of years ago when speaking to Bryony. It's incredible, and it wasn't just in terms of the application you built as well. It wasn't used in just one Olympics. It's been used in multiple Olympics, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we sort of kicked off just after the London Olympics, 2014. I think we kicked it off as a project, and then Rio, and then Tokyo now, and also other World Championships and stuff in between. So I think it's something like there's basically 60 or so national governing bodies like British Cycling and rowing and stuff, and they're all using this to manage the top athletes in the UK. Yeah.
Have you got a ticker in the office in terms of how many gold medals you've helped win?
I should talk to you guys about that.
Yeah, you should. Brilliant. So obviously, for us knowing yourself and Rocket Makers, there are so many great things we can talk about. This is perhaps more of a challenging question, but in terms of Richard Godfrey, the sort of co-founder of Rocket Makers, it's not all roses. Has there been some dark moments, and could you touch on some of those dark moments and sort of how you managed that?
I think in any business, as your owner of a business, there's ups and downs, peaks and troughs with it all and stuff there. I mean, the big dark moment, I suppose, was, 2016, and Paul, one of my co-founders' son, Will, died, and that was just hugely traumatic for Paul, but also everybody around the environment. So that's really clearly the one that sort of sticks in my mind and stuff. But I think there's other things where just running the business is really hard. I mean, I remember once realising that I had a mortgage and 3 kids, and that I brought in my total salary income for the year was less than I earned in my first year out of college and stuff there. And I think that was a dawning experience of thinking, no, this can't continue like this and there. And then I think I had another one which was, you got me thinking now. This is deep. I got another one which was just cash flow in the business and having to remember going to my parents and asking them for a loan to keep the business going. And I was like 40 years old asking my parents for money and stuff, and that's it. So I think there's definitely times which life is tough in building businesses and doing it. It's one of the things that's changed over the years for me a bit is that we used to talk a lot about what people's ideas were, and that was probably the most important thing on my mind. And now fast forward best part of 15 years in working with startups, you're much more thinking about the resilience of the people, and when you hit these bad times, are they going to pull through it and do it? So it's changed my view on those sorts of things, definitely for sure.
So obviously we talked about sort of doing research, and obviously know quite a bit about you already. In terms of sort of Rocket Makers and the sort of things you do in terms of helping startups and taking equity in startups, you mentioned sort of looking at those ideas, and that was what you used to kind of focus on. Now you're looking at the people and the resilience and their personalities. How does that influence your decision in terms of those businesses that you decide to invest into, or to sort of have an equity agreement where you take part of it and you're part of that journey? Does that have a play in terms of the individuals, or again, is it still about the idea and the product?
I think it's just it's all of the things that come together, I suppose, and it's that mix. And I guess you can never really tell what a successful end goal is going to be for any of these. We've probably done last count we've done over 50. We'd sort of helped raise more than 50 million into those businesses and things. But you've no idea which of those 50 are ever going to come through and do it. So, and I think it's just that kind of mix of it's the idea, it's the people, it's the team they can bring together, it's the timing, it's time to market and stuff.
Have you learned a lot through going through all 50 plus of those clients where you've sort of taken equity? Has there been like moments where you've been like, that was a brilliant idea, and also completely the opposite, like I'm not quite sure why we've done that?
Oh yeah. And it's great. It's one of those things where I often think about it and explain it as the the daftest business model in the world, really.
Yeah.
So when you, I'm not proud of it. In terms of, I might have come up with it, but
that sounds like a good book to be
yeah.
honest. Yeah.
I guess the way I think about it is, what if startups, if it's 1 in 10 success rate, everyone thinks it's like a 3 to 5 year journey and stuff, but actually it's an 8, 10, 12, 15
plus
year journey to do it. So it's a 1 in 10 chance of success in 10 years' time of seeing a return on what you put into it. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it necessarily.
Cheers, mate. Thanks.
That's that model, right? Cool. Back to the drawing board. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So in terms of rocket makers in the future, what does that look like, or what do you want it to be? Is it more of the same, or are we sort of moving into different territories, or into obviously your sort of work is ever evolving, I suppose, with platforms and ideas and the innovation that you create, but in your mind, what's that look like in say the next 10, 15 years?
Yeah, that's another good question. You've been practicing this stuff, haven't you? You guys know what you're doing. This stuff. So I guess one of the really fun things about Rocket Makers is working with entrepreneurs with new ideas and stuff, and that's what's exciting and interesting, because there's always something, a new bit of technology or a new business model or just a new way of thinking about something that makes something new and special that's there. And that's what I love about that. It excites me. So doing more and more of the same of that is definitely there. Mm-hmm. I guess we kind of look in things with, there's got 3 sort of markets, if you like. There's startups, there's scale-ups, and then there's kind of corporate innovators. And we've obviously done a lot of the startup stuff there. We're doing more and more on the sort of scale up and the corporate innovation side. And I think that's probably where more of the focus is going to be. So where bigger organisations who've already got audiences, they're either seeing something in market which is disrupting them, other startups that are there, or they want to self-disrupt, or they want to go into new markets themselves. So it's all of that opportunity that's there for organisations, I think, who want to kind of innovate, but don't necessarily. Sometimes they can't innovate internally because their own IT departments or whatever is just holding things back, and maybe they're not just set up with that kind of startup mentality to deliver it. And I think more and more of those sorts of things are there, and growing the business for sure. I mean, I think we've done a fair growth spurt over the last few years and things, and that's been in terms of people and the whole approach to things, and doing more and more, but not growth for growth's sake in it. I mean, I think we're definitely seeing more interest around building some of our own products and things, and growing the business in different ways like that. And and hopefully we'll come on to talk about one of those.
Exciting times. So last question, just on Rocket Makers. 15 years, it's a long time. If you were to rewind the clock and go right back to day one, anything you do differently?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah. What would I do differently? I would make sure I had a load more money in my pocket to start with than I did. I'd probably try to do it 10 years earlier. It's almost like
I think everyone would say that.
I think you guys have you basically nailed that side of things, so which is good. And I don't think I'd change a great deal else. I mean, I think it's been a really interesting journey over that time, and as you highlighted earlier, highs and lows. Building an agency is always difficult. You get times when you've got more work than you can possibly do, and you've got times when you're wondering where the next thing's coming from. And
that's the exciting time, right?
It's all exciting. That's it.
You say that now, but Jesus Christ, the number of sleepless nights. It's not fun then, is it?
No, it's not.
But when you look back.
But then going back to what you said, it's like being in the trenches and having that right sort of attitude. That's sometimes what inspires you to get up and go and make a different decision the following day. And
definitely, and it's all about the people that you're in the trenches with, right? And that's building a team, and I'm seeing that in HdE coming together with a team growing and good people and just right attitude, and that's the most important thing for me with Rocket Makers. It's how do you get a team that really want to be doing give their best and drive things forward. That's the biggest reward, really.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So sort of reflecting, I suppose, on some of those questions in terms of what does the future look like. I think what we want to sort of talk about now is I know something that you're sort of deeply involved with and developing products around, but the Metaverse, which seems to be the buzzword at the moment in our space. Richard, can you define the Metaverse for us and for those listening?
Let me get my pen, one sec.
I know
the really bad news is I can't.
Well, to be honest, I know you say
it
it was the buzzword. It has been for the last sort of year or so. But the first time that we went into your office, I believe it was a while back now. I don't know if it's 12 months ago. You started talking about it as if like you were in it, you were building things in it, you got to grips with it, and you were the first person that I actually met in person that was actually already active in there doing stuff.
Right.
So yeah, that was like really interesting, which is why we wanted to speak to you about it today.
Yeah. I mean, I can have a guess of it, like loads of people do.
Well, not to you. So, I mean, what is it to you?
I mean, I guess the way I think of it is, in a sense, it's the next version of the internet. That's what I see it, and I think, we started thinking about this probably 5-6 years ago mostly, and I think of it as if you're going to evolve the internet, then we're, as human beings, we're used to 3D environments. We're used to body language and just human cues when we interact with each other and stuff. And I think as everybody saw through the pandemic with sitting in front of Zoom calls and stuff, it's 2D representations of people remotely is it's challenging, it's fatiguing and stuff like that. But actually, if you can start to create environments where you can feel like you're in there, you can feel that there's some presence, you can engage with objects and people and things in a much more sort of natural way. Ultimately, I think that's the potential of where it goes. And then you start to bring into that the things that, if you're not restricted by the physical 3D world that we're in, then that opens up even more opportunities to people. So why, if you're going to build a store as a 3D experience in a metaverse, and a metaverse being just a means of having a 3D space that you can navigate into and around and link into different spaces, then would you build it the same way you build a physical shoe store on the high street? I mean, I think people are doing that at the moment. People are starting to think about sort of digital twins and just copying what's in but actually, for me, the opportunity is way beyond that.
I mean, I don't know why anyone would completely duplicate a physical store when they've got unlimited options in the metaverse.
I think there's a balancing act, especially with the kind of first iterations and first experiences. If it's so wildly different, that can almost alienate users and put people off. So I think there's an adjustment period that's perhaps happening at the moment. And the way we refer to stores and shops, they're selling streets on the metaverse for God knows how much on Fashion Avenue and all that kind of stuff. They're making these destinations, but within, they'll all become iterations when they are absolutely out there. Like during COVID and lockdown, we did a VR meetup, which would normally be in person, and there was, sort of characters and sort of what they call avatars. That's one. Avatars of us as individuals, but you could launch fireworks across the meeting room and stuff. It's a bit out there and a bit wild. So I think in terms of what's perhaps what they're trying to see or create now are kind of twinned experiences, what you'd find in real life, and then you familiarise yourself with that, and then we see with the concerts.
A natural evolution.
Exactly,
really.
It is.
And there was a huge difference between being on an evening event on Zoom with 50 people in tiny little squares, and you're waiting your turn, as to actually having a 3D like avatar walking around, and like your microphone would kick in when you were just like a couple of meters around that person.
Right.
So you'd physically walk up to them, but they would be talking to someone else, and you'd sort of, just like a normal networking event, you'd sit there quietly, wait your turn, eavesdrop, wait for them to finish, and then their character would turn, and then you'd have a conversation. It was completely different, wasn't it? It was really cool, but I'm sure it's gone way past that now, I think, over the last sort of 18 months as well.
I think, COVID has definitely accelerated that adoption cycle, for sure.
Yeah.
Gaming has absolutely accelerated that as well. Yeah. So obviously you see the spikes in gaming uptake during COVID and pandemic, because everyone was bored out their brains and wanting human connections and all that kind of stuff. The metaverse was kind of bridging that stuff a little bit, and the gaming seems to be the main pull at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. Things like Fortnite, and starting to see shows happening in Fortnite and Roblox, and there's just really interesting opportunities around all that space. And to be honest, for me, it's come a bit sooner than I thought it was going to be. And I think Facebook renaming and around the metaverse and all that sort of stuff is, I think that's all kind of drawn a little bit of attention to it. And now we've got this kind of metaverse bubble that's been created that's around. And in a sense, some of the work that we've been doing, I feel like it's we've kind of been pushing it faster than I thought we might have done, just because
Yeah.
of the consumer adoption and how fast that's moving now.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of that. I walked down the high street in Bath today, and I saw outside one of the mainstream banks a sign in their window asking their customers about the Metaverse. And I thought, well,
Here it comes.
that's a sign,
Yeah,
right?
it's on the
What
high
sort
streets
of
of Bath.
what sort of shop was that? Was it an empty shop?
It was one of the big
is it
banks.
a bank?
Yeah, one of the big banks talking about the Metaverse in their
Wow.
in their window. And you think, well, actually, I'm sure most people who walk past there don't know what it is and the potential for it and stuff.
Can you
like that.
imagine
But
going to ask for a business loan in the Metaverse?
It will absolutely happen. Absolutely happen.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sooner than we think, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, I'm sure computer will say no to that as well. You know? So,
I guess that brings us swiftly on to Beam. So myself and Ash know a fair bit about Beam over the last few months, but for those listening that have got no idea what Beam is, do you want to give us a brief overview of what you're doing with Beam, how it started, what your plans are for it?
Yeah, definitely. So Beam's been a little bit of a sort of an internal R&D journey that's sort of become my baby over the last few years and things. So it's kind of we started it out by just doing a very simple prototype. There was a VR exhibition that was running here a few years ago, and we put an exhibition stand together. And I went back to the team and said, "You've got 5 weeks to create something that doesn't embarrass us to put on this exhibition stand."
Great.
And thankfully, they did an amazing job with that, and we prototyped something which eventually has become Beam, and it's fundamentally looking at. Well, the way I was thinking about it was, if you look at the web world and the mobile world, the way they've evolved has been really similar. So, back in, like I said, computers were different when I started out, and when the internet started happening, the World Wide Web, and you needed to know HTML and CSS and perhaps know a developer or become a developer yourself in order just to create a simple web page with some static text on it, and then fast forward to these days, you want to space on the web, you go and buy a domain, and then you download Squarespace or Wix or something or other, and content management system just creates that for you from a template that's there. So my thinking is, how do you take the 3D immersive worlds that are going to happen in the future as part of the metaverse, and how do you make those just fast and easy and cheap for people to be able to create them, and then perhaps more importantly, how do you make them really cheap and easy for people to change the content in those without having to go back to other developers to do it?
Yeah.
So Beam, in its sort of the first part of Beam, is really about how do you sort of dynamically change 3D objects in a space through a content management system. So you can just be a content manager, and an environment that you might have made that would have lasted a month, from a return on investment perspective, probably lost you a lot of money in the process. Well, now you can make that run for 2 years by letting somebody drag and drop new content in there, changing the experience and engaging with it. So that was the first part, which is really there. And then the second part is around personalization, and how do you, based on who's in that environment, how do you show them something that's really relevant to them? But also, how do you show them things that are outside the box that they might expect to see? So I think we can open up that. So there's a kind of personalization level that sits there. Then once you've created a website, the first thing you do is go and put Google Analytics or something on there to find out who's coming to it, where they're going from. And I don't need to tell you guys that. You tell me some of that stuff, right? So then we built the kind of Google Analytics for 3D stuff, and so we have a whole analytics engine that's basically looking at.
I was going to say, did you build your own analytics tool, or have you?
Yeah, we built it from scratch actually, because we looked at what other tools are out there in the 2D and web mobile space, and we thought, well, actually it's quite different. So whether I'm looking at something or whether I'm picking up this glass and stuff, those kind of interactions and things are just so different in a 3D space that we thought we did start from scratch. So we did, and then the last part, which is I think really interesting and perhaps even a little bit far off from where we are right now, is being able to, if you can change content and you can understand how people are interacting in that space, then you can change the experience for them beyond that. And that's really interesting, I think, in training scenarios where you might be going through and using different equipment, and based on how well you do something, it gets easier or harder, but it's all entirely dynamic, not pre-coded to do that. So I think those were my thinkings around the progression of that, and then we've over the last, I guess, 4 years, with the help of an Innovate UK grant and our own just inward investment into that, were a good deal of money invested in creating this platform.
I genuinely think I'm really excited about the analytical side. I think we've obviously had a conversation before when we had the demo. The ability to have insights, albeit they are different metrics and different performance data based on interactions and engagement and looks and stuff that you would find in a Google Analytics console. But that doesn't exist at the moment. That's really, really interesting. We were talking about sort of brands getting onto it and obviously getting more people into the metaverse. When this does go fully mainstream and people are engaging in it, that is the missing link. And you're talking about the Easy CMS content management system. It's a real labour and a real session to be putting new content into these environments, into these solutions. And when you do that, particularly as marketers, and when we're speaking to marketeers from brands, it's almost the VR metaverse arena has always been a experimental, we'll test it. We've got part of our budgets for innovation or part of our budgets for experimental. Let's just dump it into VR and off it goes. And it's kind of like an afterthought. Actually, what we're seeing, what will start to happen when we start to have numbers and analytics and data you can draw into, that's when it becomes real to like brands and marketers. You can start to understand the engagement and the impact on the consumer or the end user, right down to engagements. And I think it's an interesting one as well, because the data insights are based on how you and I would react as a person. Google Analytics there are behavioural insights, but it's very much hard insights. Right. Click here, a scroll there, whatever it might be. That's your kind of performance metrics. It's quite interesting in terms of what they're doing, what you guys are doing within that space that is more around our reactions and our behaviours, and almost down to a point around your emotions within these brand experiences and what you do in that. So I think that's really, really, generally really interesting, and I think it's gonna hopefully do really, really interesting stuff, and really it's gonna go from strength to strength, because I think there's a massive gap there for what you guys are doing, and kudos for you guys seeing that as well. No,
thank you. Well, I think it's a really interesting space, and it's I guess it's coming back to that kind of looking at startup founders and what you look for and things. I mean, I think there's for me, there's been a lot of research around it, but timing is probably the most important thing, and I think we at the moment it feels like we're early in this, and I think if it's great to be early if you can stay relevant until the time that it really kicks off, and as I say, I thought we'd be a little bit more sort of in stealth and incubating this thing for another couple of years, but it feels like the metaverse is out there now. People are there.
Press go.
We've got to be out there too, right?
Is it? Do you foresee a challenge coming from some of the platform providers? So, like Meta, for example. Obviously, this is for us as marketeers. The analytics, the insight, the content management system, everything that you've talked about is an obvious play. Do you see a threat from the likes of Meta moving sort of sharply into that space, already in that space, but trying to, they are effectively a massive ad platform? Do you see that as this is going to become not an issue, but a challenge in the next couple of years as it becomes more of a rounded platform itself?
Possibly. I mean, I think one of the things we did. Well, I managed to dodge the defining the metaverse question.
Well played.
Pretty well, I thought. But one of the things that when people talked about the metaverse is this idea that it is really the true metaverse is open standards and it's there, and actually there's no you shouldn't really have any single provider, be it Meta or anybody else, who's really has some walled garden around that. So I think the idea with the metaverse is that openness and the interoperability between things, like we've seen in the web generally, and I think so. I'm hopeful that actually, as the metaverse grows, it's a much wider playing field than the incumbents that are there now. But having said that, I mean, of course, Facebook Meta have done a fantastic job in some of the device stuff they've done with the Oculus and things. So bringing those kinds of VR devices at a price point that not everybody can afford, but and the prices are going up actually. Yeah. But nevertheless, it's in my mind there's innovation that's going on, and those guys are really bringing some a lot of billions of dollars of innovation that's going to drive this forward, and yes, they'll take advantage of that for sure. And I think there's a lot of space for a lot of people, and maybe Meta will pick up this podcast and
absolutely
and come and buy Beam before it hits the
I'm
market.
sure
You never
Zuckerberg
know.
is an avid
Yeah,
listener.
I mean, I commented on Zuckerberg's Facebook today. He's just had a third child, I think. So I said congratulations. He
Yeah.
hasn't got back to me yet.
I don't want to boast or anything, but when I did start my Facebook, Mark was my first friend. So
Right.
yeah, he was actually my first friend.
There you go. There'll be an intro fee if you guys.
Yeah, all right.
No, I think it's kind of that whole that whole space really interesting. I think of it in kind of four ways of where that's going at the moment. So I think of, in order for this really to take off, there's four key elements you need. One is you need the devices that VR and AR glasses and what have you. They need to be pretty inconspicuous, lightweight, and stuff. And the only people who can really do that are the guys with the big money to achieve.
I mean, because the Oculuses are great from a tech perspective, but
Yeah.
you can't walk around the high street wearing
It
them.
doesn't look good. I mean, especially you guys take care of yourselves and a big bunch of
It's very good
goggles
for me.
on
They've
your
got a
face.
big old
It's
forehead,
not
so
gonna
actually it's
So the second thing is it's got to come down to a price level that anybody can
Absolutely,
just have, right?
yeah.
And again, the big guys are going to do that. Then if you get those two things, then the third thing is you've got to be able to create content really cheaply and well and fast. So and again, people like Nvidia and actually local companies like HdE and others are trying to think how from 2D images you can create 3D stuff, or through AI you can get at least a starting point, which then somebody can then take forward and do, and it just increases the ability to deliver those things. Yeah. So once you've got great devices, cheap cost, and environments that are cheap to make and create, then you need what Beam does, I think, which is that whole management and monetization part of that, which then is a missing piece of the moment.
And just on that third part then, so if a brand sort of reached out to you guys and said, look, we're interested in Beam and we want to sort of take a look at the environment side of things, do you have like set templates of environments for specific industries such as retail, etc., or can they actually come in and customize and build their own?
So we've done versions ourselves for different industries. So we've done we've done gaming, we've done retail. So we did a shoe store that was kind of quite a traditional shoe store actually.
It was. I've seen it. Yeah.
It wasn't that wild. We've done architectural visualization demos. We've done sort of narrative storytelling demos. We've done AR games. So so we've got lots of examples that people can see that we've built using it, which kind of showcase it in different ways. But of course, I mean, and again, having the sort of the services side of Rocket Makers alongside a product side of Beam is really nice because somebody can come to us and say we want whatever they want, and that's something we can create, and then we can create it in such a way that it can be managed really cost effectively going forward without us having to be involved.
Yeah.
So,
Cool. Really exciting. Should we set up a Beam HdE virtual office?
I just want to buy into it ASAP. We've got a mental stat here that Dell has picked out of a report. I think it's an Essential report that went out the other week. But it says that 100+ million people will be using AR every month in 2023.
Is that ludicrous?
Yeah, to your points, in terms of all those four key elements coming together, it kind of seems we're getting in there. By the end of 2023, 100 million people per month. That's bonkers, isn't it?
That's across the world.
Yeah, I guess it is pretty bonkers, isn't it? But at the same time, I think that's what the market opportunity is around this. I mean, if it's going to be the next version of the internet, then really it's going to be billions of users that are there. And I guess it's one of the things that's really critical to me around this is that what we talk about, the goggles and all that stuff having to happen, this device here is that portal on the world at the moment. And there's I think there's 1.1 billion smartphones or something at the moment out there, and that's an AR view on the world. So if you park the VR piece and just look at AR experiences and how they can be developed, I think this is the tool that's going to make that happen.
I bet. Sorry to interrupt. I bet the exact same statistic was said back in the early 90s or whenever it was, around like 100 million people within this time next year will be finding information via the internet. And people thought, that's a joke.
I feel like the man from Blockbuster that said Netflix was a joke. Quoting that stat and questioning it, because it probably is going to absolutely go to the moon.
I guess on the flip side, they were probably saying similar for 3D TVs. And then that didn't quite happen in the way that was thought. So it's it's interesting where the bets are.
I'd be really interested to see people's sort of relationship with AR, MR, VR, when Apple eventually bring out their augmented reality glasses and what that starts to do. That then starts to make it actually cool, less of a kind of gimmicky, nerdy thing for gaming and stuff. Actually, it's now mainstream. A company like Apple have made this cool product, and I think that's going to be quite interesting. And the blend of reality and digital worlds, I think that's where the major play is going to be.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and that's that's an area that we spent a fair amount of time looking at with with my old employer Microsoft with their HoloLens and stuff. So that's that sort of mixed reality, especially in the enterprise space where the goggles are, I don't know, what are they, £3,000 a piece. So they're not kind of consumer things, but actually they do enable incredible mixed reality experiences. And if anybody hasn't had a chance to play with HoloLens, find a way to do it, because it really is. It was one of those moments where a few times in my career that I've thought I'm actually living in the future. The first time I put a Microsoft HoloLens on my head, I thought I'm not in 2014 or whatever it was. It was like I'm 20 years ahead, and this is it. And I think that kind of experience when you can have that, and all the rumours about Apple, I mean, going for years, haven't they? And yet to see the evidence, but it could be transformative.
I would love to try one. Yeah, I know they're very expensive. I don't know anyone that's actually got one. You and me watched a video recently. I believe it was BT that did it in partnership with someone, but they essentially got a group of students or apprentices, and they had one team of like 5 over here, and they were building a typical IKEA box that come with lots of like written instructions. Right. And then they had another team to the right, 5 of them individually. They were all doing it, and it was tested. And they didn't have any paper. They had no instructions. They just had the HoloLens. And obviously, it was, as you were looking, it was highlighting a screw, and then you move your head, and it was highlighting the hole that it needed to go in. Right. And they timed it, and all the feedback at the end and whatnot. And the guys with the HoloLens, of course, did it a lot quicker, a lot more seamlessly. There was no mistakes. And it was like, wow, that's like pretty impressive.
I think that's really interesting. We did a project a few years ago with Bath Uni, and Bath Uni students, the engineering students, they can do an extracurricular thing, which is they get I think it's a motorcycle engine. They get given an engine, and they have to create a car. It's called a Formula student car, but it's basically a Formula One looking racing car. And we went to them and said we'd worked with them the previous year, and we'd done a little bit of kind of typical. Just looking at 3D models and breaking things apart so you could see, labelling things or how something would work. And it was a bit sort of marketing stuff, and it was great. So we went back to them the following year, said, look, we don't want to do a marketing mixed reality thing. We want to solve a real problem in the design process that you guys are going through. What's your biggest problem that you've got? And they came back to us after a couple of weeks and said, laying up all the carbon fibre on the car. So basically they're making it from scratch. So they take pieces of carbon fibre and make all of the cockpit there, and they've done all the calculations for the rigidity and flexibility of that. So they have like it's a 72-hour period or something where they're literally just laying up little sheets of carbon fibre in the right direction, in the right place at each thing. So we took the CAD models, and we basically took not a dissimilar model to that, and we basically had a HoloLens which tracked every piece, so they could tell which bit it was. And when you overlaid it on the car, you could see where it was going to go. And it was great because every piece was in the right order, going into the right place. But when you did a switch over from different people in a shift, somebody would just literally put the goggles on and take over from the other without having any conversation about it all.
Wow, yeah.
Really cool.
Saves a lot of time, I can imagine, Cool.
So the Metaverse, massive opportunity, exciting things from rocket makers. It's going to change our lives forever, right? Are we all agreed?
I think so.
Don't know when.
We should be doing this in the Metaverse, if I'm honest. This should be a Metaverse podcast.
Maybe it will. Maybe
that's the next.
This is only episode 2, so
I know. I'm getting way ahead of myself. I'm the optimist. Remember, you're the realist.
Yeah. We wanted to touch quickly on Web 0.3 before we sort of wrap up. But if we skip straight to NFTs. I'm super curious about NFTs. I don't know if you have an opinion or if you ever looked into them or if you have any sort of thoughts on them. Do you own one? Would you ever own one?
Those animations you do are NFT gold dust.
Yeah.
I can imagine that being the Rocket Makers
I can see
NFT
Matt on
range.
the side here nodding his head. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, NFTs are really, really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
And, it's, and well, the whole crypto piece and the blockchain and NFTs, a lot of people, as you know, from startup perspective, you know, a lot of the opportunities that we see have an NFT or you know, some sort of Web3 element to it these days. The challenge is that most of the things that we see are not really, they're not using true added value in it. So I guess the big challenge here is seeing through the emperor's clothes around it all into the bits that really are genuinely, interestingly useful around it. So, and I think there are some scenarios that, and Beam definitely has some potential in metaverse environments for merchandising things, and I can definitely see there's pieces. What worries me is that a lot of people just hear the bandwagon and will buy an NFT and
for an extortionate price.
And
it's almost
actually
becoming like a sort of digital currency or a digital status, so to speak. It's like there's a list of A-list celebrities now that have replaced all of their social media profile pictures with their NFTs,
Right.
you know they're careful of like the advice they give because they hold such high influence, but they're all putting it up there so people know I own one of these what they call Bored Apes, for example, or something like that, and it's.
I think it's really difficult because it isn't the physical world. So does an image of a Bored Ape add any more value than the real Bored Ape? And how do you know that you've got the real Bored Ape? I think that one of the interesting things around the whole blockchain thing, and while everyone talks about the idea of the benefits of a distributed ledger, and there really are some, but actually writing to a ledger in a distributed way is really costly, it's really slow, and from a lot of scenarios you don't need that sort of entirely independent view of a transaction happening that's there. So in a lot of use cases people kind of jump on that and it's not actually putting it into a database that you're going to own, and it could be 100 times faster, it could be so much cheaper to do it, and actually there's no difference because I guess one of the challenges with the blockchain is how do you know what's on the blockchain? As a consumer, if you're a technologist, you can probably go and go and find the information that's on there, the data that's attached, when the transaction happened, who did it. It's pretty untraceable, but you can still have the fact that it happened. If you're a consumer, you don't even know what a blockchain is. Never mind how to go and find the data for it to see if something's really owned by somebody or whatever. And then there's other sort of technical detail around it, like if you're writing something to a blockchain that's an image, well, are you writing the image to the blockchain so that it's there, or are you writing a link to the image to the blockchain? And then if that link gets broken at some point because the image is on some server that you don't own, that goes down, that loses the actual image, well, actually, that detachment means what have you actually bought then? You bought an empty link to something, right?
I never thought of that.
So, and there's ways around that. There's things like IPFS and the interplanetary file system, no less, and stuff.
That sounds grand.
That can help with some of these things. But I think so. My worry is that there's the devil's in the detail around all this, and you kind of the danger is that people just jump on it because it's order of the day and doing it without really understanding it. I think those people that really take the time to understand the detail of it, there's some use cases which are absolutely amazing for it.
I really like the use cases with physical assets and using NFTs as the authenticator, storing the certificates and the purchasing data on the blockchain as NFTs. So there's been a couple of instances in the US where it was the first house sold on blockchains as an NFT. Really expensive supercars that are sold on the blockchain, and things like high-end watches. So using their sort of authentication certificates that you'd normally get in the paper that you put in a safe or whenever you deed the house in a safe, but storing them on the blockchain. They can never be changed. They can never be sort of manipulated, and it's stored there, and all that history and all that data is stored in one central place. I think that's really interesting. That's an immediate use case for those types of things.
Where did you like gain your knowledge around NFTs? Where can people like find out more things about it or learn more about it?
Oh, I don't know. I guess it's kind of just just soaked up by conversations for me.
Yeah.
A lot of it. I don't think there's any sort of particular pointers
specific
or
resource, yeah.
whatever that I've got. I think it's
I guess you're sort of semi-surrounded with it, aren't you, with day-to-day conversations with Metaverse?
yeah. I mean, a lot of
and what
the
people
developers in Rocket Makers have their own
Yeah,
opinions.
so basically
and
go and
we
spend
talk about it and
yeah,
stuff.
go and spend a day in the Rocket Makers office in Bath, and you'll learn something.
You'll hear some stuff. But I think there's definitely it's about having not reading. I don't think just sitting reading stuff. Certainly not the mainstream stuff. Is the way to learn this. I think you've got to dig into.
You've got to get in
the
there,
real guts of how it
Yeah.
all operates and stuff there to feel it. But yeah, if you're prepared to put the time and effort to do it, I think there's real potential in some of it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. I think that might be a wrap.
I think that's it.
Really
Richard,
good.
that was brilliant, really insightful. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you guys.
Is there anything you'd like to plug? If anyone wants to reach out to you, how do they get hold of you? Or
Oh yeah, well definitely. I mean, so I'm Richard at rocketmakers.com. So as easy as that. Please get in touch, and would love. Yeah, always looking for bright ideas, interesting things to do, and always open just to have a conversation. Doesn't have to be anything more than that. It's inspiring often
Awesome.
just to talk to people about things.
Excellent. Nice one, Richard. Thank you so much.